It's alright.
Oh my god!
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we're doing something that I've been waiting a very long time to do. We finally have full skill trees. If you haven't watched my previous video, I was invited out to California to 2K to play Borderlands 4 early. I played for about 2.5 hours, and I made sure that at the start of my time playing that I moused over the entire skill tree. Now, there's a ton of nodes, so I didn't actually get to read all of them. So this is going to be a bit of a go through all of the nodes, but also kind of a live react, because I'm going to be honest, I haven't even looked at all of these things. So it should be really fun. Probably going to be a long video because these skill trees are almost triple the size of our normal skill trees that we've seen in Borderlands 3. So hope you guys enjoy the video. We're going to learn everything that we need to know about Rafa. Let's get right into it. So to start, Rafa has 3 action skills, the first of which is Orc Knives. This is a very cool action skill. It's the one they kind of set us up. It's the one I spent a lot of time playing with. This allows you to turn into this bladed form. These blades extend from your exosuit, and these blades deal melee damage, which is pretty interesting because, it means that certain effects, let's say we get things that, like a white elephant, where you could melee and proc explosions, that would be able to be procced by your action skill. So very cool that they do melee damage and not action skill damage. These also mark enemies whenever they damage them, and causing them to take increased damage from every mark. You can stack up marks on enemies, so as you slice at them, they get a stacking debuff that makes them take more damage from you, which is a maximum of 24% increased damage. And then you have a dash that you can do that's on a short cooldown that does a ton of damage. And then you also have a kind of unleash, which allows you to do kind of an explosion and deal damage to all of the marked targets. So instead of if you just go mark a bunch with your blades and then explode, it'll do a bunch of damage, or you can just kind of use it as a detonation at the end of your action skill. But this was a really cool action skill. It was surprisingly long. The base duration of this was 32 seconds with 48 seconds of cooldown. So pretty cool action skill to start. The next action skill is the Peacebreaker Cannons. These are the ones that I see myself using the most on this character. It's kind of my favorite of his 3 action skills. But you get these cannons that basically mount on your shoulder. Think Zane's mounted Mantis Cannon, but these are automatic. So you don't actually have to press a button to fire them. You click the button to activate them. They're active for 18 seconds, and anything that gets in your crosshair, anything you aim at, these cannons will automatically fire at. At base, they deal kinetic gun damage. Once again, these action skills are doing gun damage, so they can proc gun effects. Something really interesting that they're doing, these don't deal action skill damage. So once again, the build stuff that you're able to do with these action skills seems really interesting. And then if you want to end this early, you can hold it down and end early. And then you get some of your cooldown back. But these were really nice. They did a bunch of damage early on. I used them at level 5 to 10, and then I also used them when they put us in the vault, which I could talk about later, and was level 20. And there's a bunch of augments to make these things fire faster, to make them fire missiles, rockets. We'll get into all of that later. And lastly, we've got the Apophis Lance. I'm going to be honest, I didn't enjoy this. I used it twice, and both times I was pretty underwhelmed with it. I'm sure it gets better later, but this is the Apophis Lance. This allows you to equip an offhand arm cannon, so you can still shoot your main gun, but now you've got this kind of, electric pistol, and this does ordnance damage. And basically you can press your trigger button on your left trigger to shoot an ordnance blast, which consumes a charge, or you can hold it down, which, charges it up for longer and fires with higher damage, higher projectile speed, and higher projectile size, but it costs more charges. So basically, if you tap it, you could fire a few times, 3 times to be exact, and if you hold it, you can only fire it 1 time. The reason why I didn't love this is because, 1, it was something that you could miss. It was a slow projectile, and 2, I just didn't notice it dealing a bunch of damage. I hit an enemy with it fully charged, and they took about 1/4 of their HP bar, and yeah, it was kind of over. Then I had to wait a big cooldown. So I'm sure this gets better, but this one was my least favorite. Next, we've got Rafa's Vault Hunter trait. These are like passives that every character comes with. Every character's trait is different. This is not something that you can change, but you do have things that like build into your passive. or your trait. And Rafa's is Overdrive. Whenever Rafa activates an action skill, he enters Overdrive. While an action skill is active, Overdrive's duration does not decrease. While Overdrive is active, you gain 25% increased movement speed and 10% increased damage with all sources. So basically, while your action skill's up, you get this buff. And then once your action skill goes down, for 12 seconds after your action skill goes down, you're going to be able to get more movement speed and damage. I'm imagining with some cooldown stuff, you could basically have this up all the time, and 25% movement speed increase at like level 2 is pretty crazy. So very cool Vault Hunter trait on Rafa. They said that he was going to be the fastest, and he definitely felt like the speediest of the characters. Now the moment you've been waiting for, let's go through Rafa's entire skill tree. So starting in the green tree, we've got Handshake Deal. Rafa gains increased gun damage and melee damage. Midnight Oil, Rafa's action skill deals bonus corrosive damage. The longer the skill has been active, the greater the bonus damage. Expedite, Overdrive skill. Overdrive grants Rafa further increased movement speed. So you'd go from 25% movement speed to 50% movement speed from Overdrive, which is pretty awesome. Dial In, when Rafa damages an enemy with a melee attack, his melee attacks gain crit chance. This chance stacks, and all stacks are removed when Rafa critically hits an enemy. If you're wondering what this is, by the way, they're kind of bringing back that Wonderlands system where everything can crit. It doesn't need to be a headshot to crit, and that'll scale off of your crit chance. So dots will be able to crit, melee will be able to crit, and that's kind of what this is building into. His first augment is Altered Cabron. Whenever a Rafa kills an enemy while Arc Knives is active, restore a portion of his max health capacity. When Rafa gains health, deal bonus corrosive damage with all attacks and gain increased movement speed. This seems really, really cool. You gain health when you kill enemies with arc knives, and then you get stacking corrosive damage, but it also just is a separate thing. So I'd imagine that whenever you gain health, you get bonus corrosive damage and movement speed. And if you can get lifesteal, then you could basically have this up all the time, I'd imagine, which is pretty cool. El Corazon, a portion of Rafa's maximum health capacity is converted into maximum shield capacity. That's cool. Kind of like Moe's. Next augment is Dead Man Walking. Arc Knives does not end when its duration runs out. Instead, it only ends when Rafa enters Fight for Your Life or activates Blade Fury. While Arc Knives' duration is depleted, Rafa loses health instead. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy, he gains Overshield. So a lot of things going on. I did get to mess around with this. Basically, you can stay in your action skill as long as you want. It does drain life, but imagine there's could be lots of ways to get like health regen. So you could basically stay in this arc knife stance for forever, and you get Overshield whenever you damage an enemy. It doesn't even have to be killing an enemy. So this felt very powerful, and this you unlock at like level 6, I think it was. So very cool augment. By the way, just a quick note, you can have one augment and one capstone. That's what the different shapes are here. So the augments go into this slot, and then the different capstones you get to slot in this bottom slot. Diamond Hands, dealing melee damage, grants Rafa a stack of Diamond Hands. Gain increased gun damage for every stack of Diamond Hands. Once Rafa deals gun damage, stacks begin to decay quickly until they run out. Note that this is at 1.2% per stack, so I'd imagine it goes up to 10% per stack, and it gets max stacks of 100, which is technically a potential to have 1,000% gun damage from this skill, which seems pretty crazy. I'd imagine people are gonna do some shenanigans with this, where you go hit a training dummy with melee damage and then teleport with full stacks and then go nuke a raid boss or something. Pretty powerful looking passive there. Saldar, Rafa's melee critical hits gain lifesteal. So here we've got the Dead Man Walking, where you need to heal to be able to stay alive. Then you've got healing right there. In the zone, kill skill, killing an enemy freezes Overdrive's duration. So you could have Overdrive up basically permanently with this. Pretty cool. To the last, Rafa gains increased gun damage and increased skill damage. The lower his health, the greater the bonuses, stacking skill and gun damage. Also kind of has some synergies with the Dead Man Walking. Hard Sell, whenever Rafa's shields break, he instantly gains a portion of his shield max capacity as Overshield. This skill cannot be used again until Rafa activates his action skill. Interesting skill there. So that's kind of Rafa's base tree, and then it specializes into these 3 other sections that each have their own capstones. All of the characters' skill trees seem to be organized like this. So next on this like left side of the tree, we've got Blowout. Whenever Rafa applies a heavy arms mark or critically hits an enemy with his action skill, they explode in corrosive lobbed projectiles. The longer Rafa's action skill has been active, the more corrosive projectiles are spawned. Also has some synergies with like that dead man walking. Thunder Cutter, new augment. Arc Knives attacks deal shock melee splash damage, and Rafa deals increased splash damage, plus 50% splash damage. El Paraguay's, Rafa gains increased splash damage and increased splash damage crit chance. Very cool. Shock Market, whenever Rafa deals splash damage, deal bonus shock damage based on the damage dealt. Oh, that's spicy. That's very cool. 50% bonus damage whenever you deal shock splash. Damn, okay. Protecto Pulse, pressing LT while Arc Knives are active, or Rafa re-triggers his action skill, drains a portion of Rafa's shields, and deals that much shock damage to nearby enemies. So you have a like shield drain on your max shields, but you deal AoE shock damage. That's pretty cool. The big 1 out of 1 skill here is Liquidation. Marked enemies killed by Rafa leave behind a corrosive hazard. That's cool. And his capstone, Huracan Especial. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to spin his blades, creating a singularity that draws in all marked enemies and other nearby enemies while dealing continuous shock damage. Whenever this attack kills an enemy, Overdrive grants increased action skill cooldown rate. That's very cool. So basically, this is like Whirlwind, but it's Whirlwind with a singularity. Seems very cool. So the big synergy on that left side seems to be with the node that allows Rafa's Arc Knives to deal splash damage, and then you get increased splash damage. And then whenever you deal splash damage, you deal bonus shock damage based on damage dealt. So all of your attacks are going to be dealing splash damage with your knives, which is going to help with clear speed, right? And then they're going to deal bonus damage, and you get splash AoE. And then you've got the capstone, which allows you to pull in enemies. So you're pulling in all of these things, and then also dealing splash damage to all of the things that you're pulling in and spinning on. And then there was a node where, like, when you kill those enemies with your action skills active, they spawn shock or corrosive projectiles. So this definitely seems like it's more AoE oriented, which looks really awesome. The next is this middle tree. Rafa gains increased ordnance cooldown rate. Ordnance is like your grenades and rocket launchers. Parting Gift, new augment. Whenever Rafa activates his dash attack, he leaves behind a grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. Enemies damaged by these grenades become marked. Whenever Rafa applies a mark to an enemy, apply an additional mark. That's pretty cool. Grenades, when I was using them, were on like a decent cooldown. And so the dash was probably on like a 3-second cooldown. So you could just dash around dropping grenades. If you got a big AoE grenade, that could be really interesting. Collaborative Ignition, Overdrive skill. Rafa deals bonus damage of his weapon's element with all skills and ordnance while Overdrive is active. So you get bonus damage of your weapon's damage, which is very cool. Booming Business, whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy, he gains a chance to spawn a free grenade. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a grenade based on that. Whenever you crit, you have a 50% grenade chance. Oh, but it's got a cooldown time. I was about to say, you can pull out a gun and go and spawn a bunch of grenades. That's still very cool. But yeah, that's definitely limited by the cooldown. Oh, you know what? It's 0 out of 5. I bet you could get that cooldown down to, I don't know, maybe like 6 seconds or something. That's very interesting. Hemolitions, Overdrive skill. While Overdrive is active, Rafa may use grenades while cooling down at the cost of health. Every time a grenade is used this way, it costs more health until Rafa's grenade fully cools down. So you can spam grenades, but it costs health. But, you know, if you've got like lifesteal, that wouldn't really matter. His capstone, kind of going in a weird way on this. Inferno Protocol. While Arc Knives are active, Rafa's exosuit stores up all damage dealt to him. The exosuit then heats up and constantly deals a small amount of fire damage to him. Additionally, Rafa's melee attacks deal bonus fire damage. A portion of all damage dealt to Rafa is also dealt to enemies he has marked. Using Blade Fury causes Rafa to consume all stored damage and deal bonus fire damage based on his stored damage. A portion of all damage dealt this way is returned to Rafa as health. So you're getting a bunch of bonus fire damage, up to 150% of total damage taken, and it's draining your health, but you're also like exerting it as fire damage. Interesting. I was kind of guessing that this was going to be more grenade focused, but that's also pretty cool. El Diablito, a portion of all fire damage Rafa deals, also deals bonus fire ordnance damage. So all of a sudden, your arc knives or your like Blade Fury would be dealing melee damage and grenade damage. That's pretty cool. Next, we've got Collaborative Ignition. Rafa deals bonus damage of his weapon's element with all of his skills and ordnance while Overdrive is active. Synergia, whenever Rafa deals ordnance damage, he also deals increased gun damage and melee damage. This effect stacks. That's pretty cool. And lastly, for this side of the tree, we've got El Baracho. Rafa deals increased corrosive damage while his action skill is active. The longer it has been active, the greater the bonus. Also cool synergies with a Dead Man Walking. Acid Drop. Arc Knife's dash attack is replaced by a Caustic Leap. Pressing your mouse button causes Rafa to leap forward and create a caustic hazard. Whenever he lands, whenever a mark is removed from an enemy, it explodes in a corrosive nova. We've got Empuje. Rafa gains increased action skill duration. Sustainable energy. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains health regeneration based on how much overdrive time is remaining. That's interesting. I think you can freeze it in place, so you could get a lot of health regen from that. Motivar, pressing your right mouse during arc knives grants increased overdrive duration. The bonus is reset whenever Rafa activates an action skill. Galvanic Panic is our last capstone. Whenever Rafa performs a melee attack while arc knives is active, fire an acid STRM glider at an enemy in his view. Gliders deal corrosive splash damage based on the number of total marked enemies. Additionally, killing an enemy while Arc Knives is active restores action skill duration. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to fire a volley of gliders in front of him and end Arc Knives. That's cool. So you've got like corrosive drones flying out at enemies. And then lastly, we've got Cruel. Rafa gains increased skill damage with all skills. The longer his action skill has been active, the greater the bonus. Does this have a cap? It doesn't look like it has a cap. There's some really interesting things with this. I mean, a lot of his synergies seem like they'd be really strong with this Dead Man Walking, which allows you to basically never lose your action skill. That is very cool. For Rafa's next skill tree, People Person, this is the Apophis Lance skill tree. We've got Rinse, more reload speed. Los Jaras, Overdrive skill, Rafa regenerates ammo while Overdrive is active. The Thrill, Overdrive skill, Rafa gains increased fire rate, gain further increased fire rate while Overdrive is active. Preparado, whenever Rafa reloads his current gun, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This effect stacks. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Whenever Rafa consumes a charge, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This bonus is increased for every charge consumed. That's interesting. So an augment that lets you basically have more uptime of your action skill. Pod Dentro, activating an action skill grants Rafa health regen. Battery Subscription Service, another augment. Apophis Lance gains an additional charge. Additionally, when Rafa consumes 4 or more charges, gain increased action skill potency. Interesting. I'm not totally sure what action skill potency means, to be honest with you. That is cool. Arriba. Kill skill. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy, he gains increased ordnance cooldown rate. The first shot fired from a fully loaded weapon magazine gains increased damage. I've seen that perk before. Very cool. Doesn't look like the gun damage bonus is that large, though. It's only 8% per point. El Centro, Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with all weapons and action skills. While Overdrive is active, the longer Overdrive has been active, the greater the bonus. A weapon handling passive. Cool. Metal Management. Whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, his gun consumes no ammo. Oh, that's cool. Oh, you know, I bet you... I was thinking that'd be interesting if it worked for ordnance. Like, if you use your action skill and then shot your rocket launcher, if it would actually not consume ammo or not, like, go on cooldown. But I'm not sure if that would work or not. That's interesting, though. And then we got Abajo. Whenever Rafa throws a grenade, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. So far, everything in this blue tree seems very, like, you know, action skill spammy. Cooldown rate, duration, all that kind of stuff. Extra charges. And some ordnance thrown in there. Next, we got Brain Dump. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains crit chance with his guns while Overdrive is active. Cool. That's a lot of crit chance. Ojo Rojo. Apophis Lance gains critical hit chance. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with Apophis Lance, gain further increased critical hit chance. So off the bat, that's 25% from one and then 40 from another in terms of crit. And then the bonus is another 35. Okay, you basically be critting all the time on every shot. Rafa gains increased status effect chance and also gains further increased shock chance. Don't love that skill. After sliding, Rafa's action skill deals bonus shock damage, and he deals increased critical hit damage. Interesting. That's cool. I like that. You're going to be critting all the time. You slide, and then for the next 3 seconds, you've got a lot more crit damage. Whenever Rafa shocks an enemy, all shots fired at that enemy are critical hits. That is also pretty cool. The only thing with that is I feel like you're already going to be critting. If you go into this tree and you invest heavily, you might already be critting all the time. Raiju, Apapa's Lance weapon, is replaced with a close-range, shocking taser burst. Pressing and holding causes Rafa to deal shock damage all around him. The longer Rafa holds this attack, the greater damage it deals. That's cool. And then we've got Fiesta. Whenever Rafa applies a status effect, his action skill consumes no duration, and Apapa's Lance consumes no charges. Whenever you apply a status effect, your action skill consumes no duration, and Apapa's Lance consumes no charges. Wow, okay. That's so far my favorite note in that tree, because you could kind of just spam your lance. Next up, we've got Drone Defense. Whenever Rafa activates an ordnance, spawn gliders that hover near him. As he takes damage, transform some of that damage to, or transfer some of those damage to his gliders. Once a glider receives too much damage, it explodes, dealing corrosive splash damage. Okay, so you can have drones that absorb damage for you. We've got Gibastruct module, new augment. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy with his Apapa's Lance, spawn a free grenade on that enemy. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a copy of that grenade instead. Cool. El Soldado. Rafa gains increased gun damage while overdrive is active. The bonus is doubled while Rafa is charging Apapa's Lance. That's cool. Okay, that's a lot of gun damage while you're holding down your lance. Rafa gains increased ordnance damage after reloading his gun. This bonus stacks. Detonation. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with an action skill, place a remote detonator on that enemy. Ordnance Overdrive detonates all remote detonators. Remote detonators gain increased damage and increased splash radius for every remote detonator. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with an action skill. Okay, that's kind of giving like Nisha vibes from the pre-sequel. That's pretty cool. Drone Assault is a follow-up on the other drone thing. Whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, send one of his gliders at an enemy in his view. Once it arrives, it explodes in a corrosive explosion equal to its remaining health. And then his capstone, Project Basilisk. Apapa's Lance now fires a corrosive blob that leaves a corrosive hazard and splits into several smaller projectiles. Whenever it detonates, the more charges Apapa's Lance consumes at once, the more it splits. Okay, that's cool. Big corrosive lob. And then lastly, for the Apapa's Lance tree, we've got Jacques. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with his skill, he gains a stack of Jacques. For every stack of Jacques, he gains increased overdrive bonuses. Whenever overdrive ends, lose all stacks. Okay, more movement, speed, and damage. Engorged Boar. Oh, God. Apapa's Lance gains increased projectile size, projectile speed, and increased number of chains. Okay. I got very scared there seeing the name Boar. That is definitely not the Boar that we know, but that does sound cool. La Garza. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with weapons and action skills while overdrive is active. 2 weapon handling things in one passive tree. Okay. Mate. When overdrive ends, convert all Jacques stacks into mate stacks. Gain increased action skill cooldown rate for every stack of mate. Once Rafa's action skill is readied, lose all stacks of mate. Rafa gains increased fire rate and increased reload speed while overdrive is active. Project Gorgon. Apapa's Lance weapon is replaced with an incendiary laser that pierces enemies. Pressing and holding caused this laser deal increased damage and chain to more enemies as it consumed charges. Okay, that sounds cool. I like that. I dig that. And then per my last, whenever Rafa deals damage with an action skill to an enemy, he has a chance to deal that damage again. Double damage chance. Looks like that would stack up to 20% chance to deal double damage. That is very cool. That's definitely a very interesting skill. Okay, so that is his Apapa's Lance tree. And lastly, we've got his red tree, Remote Agent. This is the tree that looked the most interesting to me, so let's check it out. Shield Barriest. Overdrive skill, Rafa gains increased shield recharge rate and improved shield regen delay while overdrive is active. Not bad. Rafa and his Peacebreaker cannons gain increased fire rate. I dig that. Yeah, those Peacebreaker cannons were doing big damage. Rafa gains increased gun damage. Solid passives there. Huega. Whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy, action skill duration is restored. Ooh, that's cool. You keep up your Peacebreaker cannons more often. Instinto. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons gain increased critical hit chance. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to double their critical hit chance and gain increased crit damage, while also causing the duration to drain faster. Kill skill killing an enemy causes Rafa to regain action skill duration, while also causing his action skill duration to drain faster. Interesting. So you can like activate them and get a bunch of damage, but they're going to run out way faster. Field repairs. Whenever Rafa activates an action skill, restore a portion of his maximum shield capacity. If his shields are already full, gain overshield. Bullet Buddy Deluxe. While Peacebreaker cannons are active, Rafa and his allies regenerate ammo. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons now deal bonus fire damage based on how full his gun is, and his turrets shoot exploding bullets while his magazine is full. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes Rafa's shots to not consume ammo, but causes action skill duration to drain faster. That's also really, really cool. Okay. Sia, kill skill. Killing an enemy restores shields based on Rafa's maximum health capacity. So far, this tree seed's got a lot of shield synergies. Rafa deals increased damage from all sources. The fuller Rafa's shields are, the greater the bonus, while Rafa's shields are at maximum capacity. Double the bonus. Nice. Venganza. Whenever Rafa's shields break after being fully recharged, spawn a free grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. Maestro. Rafa gains increased skill damage. And Resiliencia. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased damage reduction while overdrive is active. Oh, wow. That's actually like a lot of damage reduction. That's pretty nice. Okay. On the left side, we've got Hell in a Shell. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to fire 2 large fire bombs that deal fire damage to a large area. Killing enemies reduces the skill's cooldown. That's pretty sick. Asymmetric Warfare. I talked about this in the previous video. This sounds nuts. So indirect projectiles gain increased damage. Indirect projectiles include all action skill weapons, thrown weapons, and projectiles not fired from your gun. I'm not sure if this includes Jacob ricochets or not. If it's including Jacob's ricochets, this is going to be insane. Because, you know, you can get a Jacob's part on basically every weapon in the game. So any weapon could ricochet. I'm not sure what else would be causing indirect projectiles besides like ricochet bullets. Errant Spark. All indirect projectiles deal bonus fire damage. If the indirect projectile already deals fire damage, double the bonus damage. That's very cool. So more synergies with fire weapons. Ardid. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain lifesteal. Oh, wow. I mean, 10% lifesteal. You probably did put 1 point into that. Rolling Stone. While moving, shots have a chance to bounce off of Rafa. This chance is doubled while sliding. I'd imagine that these count as indirect projectiles as well. Melee Override. Press and hold V to lob a glider at an enemy. Once it reaches its target, it explodes and deals fire splash damage based on the amount of ammo in Rafa's gun when he threw the glider. Double auto shot. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannon weapons are replaced with shotguns that deal increased damage and have increased pellet count. Additionally, Rafa's turrets gain a chance to ricochet off of targets. Ricochets deal reduced damage and critical hits always ricochet. So yeah, I'm imagining ricochets count as those indirects. That also sounds insane. Lateral plinking. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain a chance to ricochet. Hell yeah. So like your ricochet is going to be doing more damage. They're going to be healing you. They're going to be dealing bonus fire damage, and they can ricochet again. Dude, if there's a recursion in this video game, that might be my skill tree. That sounds really, really fun. Next, we've got Confetti. Rafa's ordnance deals bonus damage in his current weapon's element. That's pretty cool. Insta-Fort Battle System. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons also deal ordnance damage and deal increased ordnance damage while Peacebreaker cannons are active. Pressing F while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to disconnect from Rafa and become a turret companion that begins firing at enemies in place. Additionally, it will occasionally fire grenades at its target. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, it copies that grenade. Pressing F again returns the turret companion to Rafa's back. That's pretty freaking cool. So you make the cannons do ordnance damage. Vitriol. The first shot fired from Rafa's fully loaded magazine deals bonus corrosive damage. Nice. Lightning Rod. While aiming with a gun, Rafa deals bonus shock damage. Each time Rafa hits an enemy this way, deal increased bonus damage until he zones out. You get increased bonus damage of the shock damage. Okay. Cool. Pain reaction. Rafa's weapons gain a chance to ricochet off of enemies with status effects. Oh, that's a crazy synergy. Ricochet damage is based on the damage dealt. So if you're using elemental weapons, especially if you're using the thing that gives you extra like bonus status effect damage, you could be using a non-status effect weapon and still be getting status effects, and then you get more ricochets. The ricochets do more damage. Rafa sounds really good for clear. Obviously, all the ricochet stuff might not work against bosses, but damn. Alacron enemies damaged by Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons have increased status effect chance. So you have more chance to proc status effects against them. Beam team. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons. Weapons are replaced with a shock beam and a corrosive beam. Each beam automatically locks onto enemies in your view and may lock onto different enemies. Whenever Rafa applies a status effect, gain increased action skill damage. Nice. Really leaning into status effects with this one. Whenever Rafa inflicts a status effect on an enemy, gain increased action skill cooldown rate and action skill duration. This effect stacks. And then we go over to Barrage. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased splash damage while Overdrive is active. Nice. Unmissable missiles. Press F while Peacebreaker Cannons is active. Cause them to fire a volley of homing rockets at enemies in view at a cost of action skill duration. Everdrive. Overdrive gains increased duration. Devil May Care. Overdrive skill. While Overdrive is active, Rafa gains increased movement speed and gains health regen. While Overdrive is not active, Rafa takes increased damage and gains increased action skill cooldown rate. That's cool. Temerario. Rafa gains increased gun damage but decreased weapon handling. This bonus is based on how long Overdrive has been active. Increased gun damage. Okay. There's a lot of things with Rafa and his like talent for Overdrive to keep it up and be massively benefiting while it's up. Speaking of which, Soltado, kill skill, double all Overdrive bonuses. Damn, that's a lot of movement speed. You know, you can get into like that 50% movement speed. That's 100% movement speed on kill. And there's like other movement speed things. He's going to be flying. Volatile hollow points. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannon weapons are replaced with rockets that deal splash damage. Very cool. Guys, that is it for the skill tree breakdown. Overall, Rafa is looking really cool. His Apophis Lance tree, I'm going to be honest, just doesn't really appeal to me. I'm sure it's going to be good, but it's like the one that's jumping out the least at me. With the thing that looks the coolest is gotta be the like indirect projectiles ricocheting, and all of the ricochets have a chance to deal like another ricochet and deal bonus damage and get lifesteal. That all sounds really cool. The melee tree also seems really awesome with all of the like splash damage and the bonus damage that you're gonna be dealing with the whirlwind that can pull enemies in and basically having the knives up all the time. Obviously, my only concern about like, you know, using an action skill that's basically a melee is if there's flying enemies or flying bosses. But overall, Rafa is looking really, really cool. He's definitely got some like Zane vibes to him, and he looks like he's going to be moving insanely fast. So you guys, let me know what your thoughts are down below. Did this change your mind? If you weren't going to start Rafa, is this now going to be your character, or are you going to be playing someone else? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more full skill tree breakdowns, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.